Hello, Robs. We're back with A Dream of Dracula in Search of the Living Dead by Leonard Wolf, a 1972 book. And we pick up on chapter 3. Death is the mother of beauty. As I still fight a cough. No, let's hold this. Oh, yeah, let me unplug this. Among the many half-pagan legends that were connected with Ireland during the Middle Ages, one of the most beautiful is that of the islands of life and death. In a certain lake in Munster, it is said there were two islands into the first death could never enter, but age and sickness and the weariness of life and the paroxysms of fearful suffering were all known there, and they did their work till the inhabitants, tired of their immortality, learned to look upon the opposite island as upon a haven of repose. They launched their barks upon the gloomy waters. They touched its shore, and they were at rest. Lecky's History of European Morals. Where's that morale? It's morals. Volume 1. Intrinsically, a dead human body is a valueless, a menace to public health. The following are suggested as proper terms: service, not funeral; Mr., Mrs., Miss Blank, not corpse or body; preparation room, not morgue; casket, not coffin; funeral director or mortician, not undertaker; reposing room or slumber room, not laying out room; display room, not showroom; baby or infant, not stillborn; deceased, not dead; autopsy or post mortem, not post; casket coach, not hearse; shipping case, not shipping box; flower car, not flower truck; cremains or cremated remains, not ashes; clothing, dress, suit, etc., not shroud; drawing room, not parlor. Albert or Edward Alexander Martin, The Psychology of Funeral Service. The dead have an evil odor. It is the only reproach we can bring against them, and the living, if we had the sense of smell that the dead no longer possess. Maurice Maeterlinck, Before the Great Silence. The attraction of blood, hot red blood with its thick smell, its extraordinary changeability, the pulse in the throat, marking an endangered rhythm, is the place to kiss. The perfumed skin beneath which surges the fountainhead. So long as it throbs, there is life. Hence the power of this loathsome scene. There she lies, the beautiful girl, not quite asleep, in a black bed. Her hair, richly disheveled, spreads out in a graceful spillage over her pillow. Her neck and bosom, the panting author tells us, would have formed a study for the rarest sculptor that ever Providence gave genius to. Oh, what a world of witchery was in her mouth, slightly parted and exhibiting within the pearly teeth that glistened even in the faint light that came from that bay window. One shoulder is entirely visible, whiter, fairer than the spotless clothing of the bed on which she lies, is the smooth skin of that fair creature just budding into womanhood. The stage is set for lust, voyeurism, nympholepsy, rape, or fetishism. This time, however, even more is at stake. There is lightning and thunder, hail and wind. The sleeping girl suddenly opens eyes of a celestial blue and cries out in alarm. It is the elements she fears, but we, who have been gazing at her panting bosom, have begun to fear and to desire more, much more. The wind dies down, the hail is quieter, then a scraping at the window, and a tall figure, fingernails, intense, fear. That one shriek is all that she can utter. A heart beating wildly, bosom, eyes, window. She waits, froze with horror, long arms moving. It is too dreadful. She tries to move. Hoarse, whisper, cry, help, help, help. The tall, gaunt figure in hideous relief a long gaunt hand which seems utterly destitute of flesh, long nails that literally appear to hang from the finger ends. The figure turns half round. It is perfectly white, perfectly bloodless, I believe it said. The eyes look like polished tin, the fearful looking teeth glaringly white and fang like. No sound comes from its lips, but her eyes are fascinated. What was it? What did it want? Her bosom heaves. He advances. God of heaven, is it real or some dream? A sudden rush, then she screamed. The bedclothes fell in a heap. Her beautiful rounded limbs quivered. He drags her, forces her head back by the long hair. He seizes her neck in his fangs, fang like teeth. A gush of blood and a hideous sucking noise follows. The girl has swooned, and the vampire is at his hideous repast. The prose is penny dreadful, the scene is lurid, almost nauseous, and yet some sort of gasping validity is taking place. The towering figure with the tinny eyes, the pale ravener of horrible meat, who passes up any number of opportunities for more usual wickedness, makes claim on our attention that we know very well should be denied. We care about him because we are dying creatures, and this scene, with all its wide eyed rutting, is nevertheless focused on the question of death. With the simple brutality of an instinctive knife stroke, it anatomizes the situation. Veins, arteries, gonads, the beating heart, and innocence pulse together toward a common goal, which is death. For creatures like ourselves, whose souls are fastened to a dying animal, news from the dead counts. They seem alive in the human Hades of Homer, yet cannot well speak prophecy or know the living except they drink blood. Wherein is the life of man? Hello, Brobs. Varney the Vampire, or The Feast of Blood, a romance of exciting interest. Varney the Vampire. Never heard of him. No, this is the Pepic of Gigodish. Death, a medieval drawing. Look at that motherfucker. This is a book on Dracula. When the vampire moves, it is as the dead alive who mimic life. No wonder we draw near. But first there must be blood. Blood! When it spurts, it makes the nearly silent sound above which the dead may speak. Since the precincts of the dead are wider than those of the living, and since they have had more time to learn whatever it is they know, when the vampire bends to drink, we watch respectfully. When he speaks, we listen. It may be he will prophesy. The boy Isaac may have been puzzled watching his father Abraham and the two servants cutting the wood, loading it on the donkey, leading him with them into the wilderness, where a burnt offering was to be made. Abraham was a wise old man. Presumably the servants were sensible too. It was a long journey with no sign, no mention of a lamb or kid to be sacrificed, and yet the boy kept still. On the third day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place from afar off, and told the young men to stay with the donkey. The wood for the burnt offering the old man loaded on his son's shoulders in silent tribute to the boy's strength and health. Isaac, an acquiescent boy, bowed under the weight of the faggots and walked beside his father, who carried a smoldering torch and a knife. Then, in the last 30 or 40 yards, the number is not specified, Isaac asked the obvious question, "My father, behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering?" And was given an evasive answer. "God will provide himself the lamb for a burnt offering, my son." Moments later, the old man called a halt, unloaded the faggots Isaac carried, built an altar, and set the wood around it. Then, with the ropes that had bound the faggots, he tied the boy. Then Abraham, and if you don't know what faggots are, they are bundles of sticks. Then Abraham put forth his hand and took the knife to slay his son. What Isaac said is not recorded. He should have cried out, as the boy hostage did in Antoine de Lascelles' Le Réconfort de Madame de Dufresne. I don't know how to say that. The boy, son of the Seigneur du Chastel, commander of the besieged port of Brest, was a hostage in the camp of the Black Prince of England. The Black Prince, in violation of the terms of a truce concluded by him with the boy's father, threatened to kill the hostage unless Brest surrendered. The Seigneur du Chastel rejected the demand, and the 13-year-old boy in chains was led toward the place of his execution. When he realized what was being done to him, he cried to Thomas, the leader of his guards, "Oh, Thomas, my friend, you take me away to die. Alas, you take me away to die, Thomas. You take me away to die. Alas, my Lord Father, I shall die. Alas, my Lady Mother, I shall die. I shall die. Alas, alas, I shall die. Die, die." And when he was set down on the mount, there was there a friar who, by beautiful words of hope and the grace of God, little by little confessed him and absolved him from his little sins. And because he could not take death willingly, they had to hold his head and bind his arms and legs so that the legs were bruised by the arms down to the bones. Isaac made no uncouth outcries, and God, satisfied with Abraham's piety, sent a ram to catch its horns in a nearby thicket, and Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. The French child, properly affronted by the bloody use to which his life was put, complained, but on that day at least, heaven was silent. It may be, as Donne insists, that we have a winding sheet in our mother's womb, which grows with us from our conception, and we come into the world wound up in that winding sheet, for we come to seek a grave. It is a thought meant to be consoling, as it reminds us that this life is a preparation for the one to come, but we do not feel dead. Minute by minute, we reckon the difference between the motion of our lungs drawing oxygen in, spurning carbon dioxide, and that other stillness with which the dead take the air. Their indifference is not ours. Rain still makes us think, blink, and cold to reach for coats to wrap us in. And if, for our soul's sake, we nod our heads and agree that this life is but a long day's dying, we take prudential care in crossing Market Street. Because there are still plenty of lips to kiss and wines to taste, and children who have not heard our doctrines waiting for us to bring the daily sense of deceitful permanence into homes that are much warmer than any tombs. Ivan Ilyich, brooding on his deathbed about life, observes that there is one bright spot there at the back, at the beginning of life, and afterwards all becomes blacker and blacker, and proceeds more rapidly in inverse ratio to the square of the distance from death. But when the final moment comes upon him, and he sees what he sees is, in place of death, there was light. Again, hopes for the spirit intervene to cast a glow over what our more usual considerations suggest will be darkness. Lazarus had a good friend who could wake him from his unending sleep to this life, but belief in the divinity of Jesus is not likely to vouchsafe us that sort of favor very soon. Even Martha was surprised when Jesus said, "Take ye away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, by this time he stinketh, for he hath been dead 4 days." What followed was, of course, a miracle, and the dead man in his bandages came out of the tomb and was unbound and was recovered and lived, according to one tradition, for 30 years more. To recover this life when it is gone requires some pretty vigorous intercession. Orpheus, the gifted Thracian who brought music to his barbarian people, who sustained with his lyric skill the Argonauts on their long journey, had a divine ancestry and an art nearly as divine in his favor when he made his descent into Hades for his lost Eurydice. When he struck his lyre, not only the beasts and the trees were bushed or hushed with wonder, but the very stones as well. The story is well known. Eurydice, flying from a rape attempt, trod on a serpent and was mortally wounded. Orpheus, armed with his lyre, entered the regions of darkness and made his way to the seat of Pluto and Persephone, the king and queen of the netherworld. It was a musical journey that arrested inevitably for a time. The wheel on which Ixion was bound stopped turning. Sisyphus and his stone paused at the sound of the lyre. Tantalus forgot his thirst, and the vulture lifted his clacking beak from Tityrus's liver. And for the king and queen of hell they were enchanted, and allowed Eurydice to return with Orpheus to the realm of light. You're reading the Goodbye, Motherfucker. That's what you're reading. But there was a catch. Eurydice, with her snake wounded foot, was permitted to limp along behind him as he made his way toward life, but he was expected to have faith in the promises of death and was forbidden to look back to see if the pale ghost was still following him. So just as the sin ruled over people. Oh my god. Don't start writing fucking paragraphs, dude. How long he kept his eyes steadily looking ahead, we do not know, but no one is surprised that he turned anxiously to see if she was there. She was, but vanished the moment he looked to see. What do you got? He tried a second journey, but this time even genius would not do, and he could not get past the river Styx. He spent what was left of his life lamenting the loss of Eurydice until a mob of ecstatic Thracian maidens at a Bacchic festival, outraged because he spurned their erotic advances, tore him to bits. His head and lyre were thrown into the river Hebrus, down which they floated, continually making music till they came to the sea, whose waves carried them to Lesbos. The inhabitants of this luxurious island buried the head and hung the harp upon a tree, thereby meriting the gifts of poetry and music from the gods. Oh no. Why do you have to do it, Bubba? Why do you gotta be a fucking dullard of the lowest order? It is a pretty tale, so pretty it is easy to forget that Orpheus failed in his mission. Eurydice stayed dead and gone. The message, scrawled on the wall of a toilet at Florida State University in Tallahassee, Florida, reads, "I believe in death. I seen it in a movie once." It is a poignant remark made by someone very young and very witty. Film is a good place to get a charge of feeling about death without confronting it. All the ways of dying are contained in celluloid without ever being dangerous or imminent, because only the eye and the ear are involved. While death, like life, is an intricately sensual matter. Blood is not only bright, it has taste and smell, it has texture, and when it drips or spurts, it can be heard. All those fine bit players in a pirate movie who leap into the air to simulate their own destruction when the barrels of gunpowder at their feet blow up are easily absorbed as technicolor motion. But real dead men begin another drama in their flight. Catch one of those girls. Jesus Christ, I can't read. I'm probably too tired to read, but catch one of those agile fellows in midair, lay him down gently, and find out in 5 dimensions what happened. It was a bit of spar or a spike that pierced his skull. The pirate saw light and may have felt a flash of heat, but given the slow speed of sound, it is likely that he died in silence and only the survivors heard the explosion that was killing him. The bit of steel, meanwhile, was tearing through the soft brain tissue, which, used as it is to interpreting messages from the outlying precincts of the body, has no sensation of its own, so that in this instance, at least the death is painless. But not without reaction. The wound is at the very center of the central nervous system, where now there is a torn canal of gray matter. Since nerve signals move at the speed of light, one has to suppose a lightning instant when the spinal column, the nerve endings, the cerebral cortex, and the involuntary nervous system set up a tangle of commands, demands, questions, countermanded decisions. Muscles flex, cells die, fingers grope, the body makes a lunge as if snatching distractedly for life. Sphincters relax, letting feces and urine escape. Sometimes there is a spasmodic erection and a joyless, partnerless orgasm. When the pirate hits the ground, there may be a few melodramatic thrashings as the dutiful tissues of the body try to obey orders that by now, physiologically speaking, have no longer any rhyme or reason. Finally, the flesh is still. In Technicolor or on the stage, it all looks pretty good. A most satisfactory way for the bad guy to end. If it is a good guy dying, the convention allows the process to happen more slowly so that the misunderstood hero can straighten out his moral bank account or say a lingering farewell to the girl who knew all along that his heart was pure. Dying scenes are great for tying loose ends. Estranged friends are reconciled. A father forgives his son, a son his father. Provision is made for the care of leftover children or the passing on of stewardship of land. In any case, there is time for recognition, repair, repose. It is difficult in the grip of the arts to remember that what is lying there after the music stops is a corpse. We prefer to remember Cordelia in her father's arms, Lear crying out, "Howl, howl, howl, howl! Oh, you are men of stone. Had I your tongues and eyes, I'd use them so that heaven's vaults should crack. She's gone forever. I know when one is dead and when one lives. She's dead as earth. Lend me a looking glass. If that her breath will mist or stain the stone, why, then she lives. She does not live, and Lear's grief contracts in ever narrowing circles, whose last inexorable ring constricts his heart when he accepts what he has already known. And my poor fool is hanged. No, no, no life. Why should a dog, a horse, a rat have life, and thou no breath at all? Thou'lt come no more. Never, 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 never. Pray you unto this bottom. Thank you, sir. Do you see this? Look on her. Look, her lips. Look there. Look there. At last the strong, stubborn, foolish, magnificent old man who had been stretched upon the rack of this tough world too long dies, leaving the shadows of his newly acquired tenderness and dignity to vibrate for a while upon the stage. King Lear is a play of great grief and many corpses, but mercifully the audience leaves before the other drama Poe speaks of begins. The play is the tragedy, man, and its hero the conqueror worm, dissolution, the stink of our mortality. Wallace Stevens, for whom death is a lyric accommodation, can distract us from its first brutalities. He writes, The body dies, the body's beauty lives, so evenings die in their green going, a wave interminably flowing, so gardens die, their meek breath scenting the cowl of winter done repenting. So maidens die to the auroral celebration of a maiden's choral. Susanna's music touched the body strings of those white elders, but escaping, left only death's ironic scraping. Now in its immortality it plays on the clear vial of her memory and makes a constant sacrament of praise. I shall be back in a moment. And that moment's come. Thought my heater or my furnace was not starting, but it started. In the languor of these lines, it is easy to float away from the less musical consideration of the fate, not of man, but of the flesh that housed him. Carry on. The subtraction problem that turns Polonius, a respected counselor, into a set of guts, lugged into a neighbor room, and changes Ophelia, mad, distracted, singing, beautiful, into so many pounds of soggy meat, daubed in the slimy bottom of a pond. Recovered from the water, the corpse of Ophelia exhibits the signs of two kinds of death: somatic death, in which we recognize an end of self, and molecular death, which involves the final extinction of the cells of the body. Somatic death is what the eye and touch are able to notice. The blood does not circulate, there is no breath, no heartbeat, no pulse. The flesh is cold. In a sense, this is the death that is bearable for the bystander. It is the presentable, the memorable death when friends can close the eyes of what is still recognizable as the dear departed, or arrange his limbs. This is the death the undertakers do their best to preserve. They are the artists of the husk whose sole concern is to preserve a simulacrum that will embarrass no one's memory. And memory is what they serve. The embalming of a body which has been disfigured by injury may present problems of a special difficulty. Son of a bitch. Of a special difficulty, bruises and abrasions must be hidden, lacerations repaired, and fractured limbs supported. An attempt must also be made to restore a lifelike appearance, sometimes to permit identification of the body. To this end, the body is drained, emptied, shaved, injected, pumped, sewn, cut, clipped, massaged, clamped, disinfected, heated, chilled. The drop jaw of death is made firm and noble, with needle and thread passed upwards behind the upper lip and out through one of the nostrils. Lips are creamed, rigor mortis is broken, discolorations of the skin are bleached away. On the afternoon of his funeral, the bombing victim, the electrocuted murderer, or the strangled woman all lie in an attitude of stylized but never quite lifelike repose, whose appearance, depending on the embalming fluid used, can be maintained for as much as 8 weeks or more. Left to itself, the body's second molecular death is implacable. It is what we know least about and want least to know. It is the backstairs death that mocks the parlor presentation, the one that Emily Dickinson exposes in her fastidious verse. That village girl knew where all the pristine dignities were leading, and she tells us, I heard a fly buzz when I died. The stillness in the room was like the stillness in the air between the heaves of storm. The eyes around had wrung them dry, and breaths were gathering firm for the last onset when the king be witnessed in the room. I willed my keepsake, sighed away what portion of me be assignable, and then it was There interposed the fly, with blue, uncertain, stumbling buzz between the light and me, and then the windows failed, and then I could not see to see. A chill shriek of recognition. The king? Resurrection? Salvation? Maybe, yes, later. But first the fly, whose instinct is corruption. Baudelaire is even more explicit. Do you remember the object we saw, my soul, that lovely morning in summer? At the turn of the path, a foul corpse on a bed sown with stones. Its legs in the air like a woman in lust, aflame and sweating its poisons, opening cynically, nonchalantly, its belly full of gases. And the flies buzzed over the putrid belly from which battalions of black larvae emerged, streaming like a thick liquid over the living rags. And because despair is the corrosive pearl against which Baudelaire's imagination presses, he writes, well then, my beauty, tell the worms who will devour your kisses that I have preserved the shape and the essence divine of my decomposed loves. We call it molecular death, and it is not immediately repulsive. Indeed, despite the first pallor of the skin that comes about because the blood has stopped flowing, the newly dead body can take on an unwanted look of youth because of a condition called primary flaccidity, a muscular suppleness that happens soon after somatic death. It is in this state of the body that the look of peace can be most easily imposed on it. With the passage of time, the body begins to lose water. The skin loses its elasticity and may be wrinkled. The eyes soon lose their luster. The cornea, or window of the eye, becomes cloudy, and the eyeballs gradually lose their tension and are easily distorted by pressure. The woes of the cadaver go on. Half an hour after death, it begins to bruise because of a condition known as hypostasis. Dark, nearly purple spots develop following on an infusion of unoxygenated blood into the capillaries. The discoloration of hypostasis lasts 6 to 8 hours, during which time rigor mortis also sets in. 3 hours after somatic death, the muscles in the eyelids, neck, and jaw turn rigid, and the first suppleness of primary flaccidity disappears. The jaws become firmly fixed, the limbs stiff, and the joints are set in the position in which they were at the time rigor occurred. The muscles remain stiffened for 16 to 48 hours. Considerable force must be used to overcome the stiffness of rigor. As if the body had its own sense of gallows humor, one of the effects of rigor mortis in the male corpse is that it can produce an oozing of seminal fluid from the penis. After rigor, the body relaxes once more into what is called secondary flaccidity and settles down, as it were, for worse to come, as what was once a self becomes a porriture. A general mess of imprecision of being, and the stages from death to cadaver to carrion are accomplished. But oh, the dreadful stink, preceded first by a greenish tinge on the skin over the belly about which Chaucer's pardoner has this to say, O womb, O belly, O stinking cod, fulfilled of dong and of corruption. At either end of these foul is the sun. How great labor and cost is thee to find, O gut, O belly, O stinking stomach, filled with dung and with corruption. At either end of thee the sound is foul. How much labor and cost it is to feed thee. The pardoner's vituperation is directed at the living belly. The state of the dead one is even worse. Once putrefaction has begun, the last vestiges of politeness are finished, and the game of identity, the pretense of a self, is over. The skin over the lower abdomen turns green, the color spreads, and with it the stink as the tissue of the intestines breaks down. Whoever it was, a king, a queen, a scurvy rogue, a young schoolteacher, a rapist murderer, a father, a mother, or an unborn child, the suppurations are the same, though the pace at which they appear may vary. In the presence of the gases of putrefaction, the distended bellies, the bloated and blistering skin, it is hard to keep in mind Stevens's tenacious encouragement that death is the mother of beauty. Hence, from her alone shall come fulfillment to our dreams and our desires. The man I see in the mirror gets a look of surprised misery in his eyes, as if he heard the flapping of leather wings bearing creatures through the darkness who will converge on the fluorescent lighted silver rectangle of the mirror, where his face is illuminated, trapped, arms infinitely extensible, rigid, will reach for him, and he will be plucked from the cold light into a blackness made of coal dust, oblivion, and extinguished sunbeams. Timor mortis conturbat me. The fear of death disturbs me. I will teach the mirror to lie as I tilt my head to find out how I am doing in middle life. The mirror equably shows a network of wrinkles under my eyes. Kindly wrinkles, or wrinkles, wrinkles many. I turned my head to get a three-quarter view, a gesture that used to give me considerable secret pleasure. Now I brush the hair back from my forehead. The fluorescent light sees not only gray hair, but entire streaks of white. I think of a pretty girl who said, I've always wanted to have an affair with an older man. What will she say at the next turning of the seasons? When my eyes are fogged, and my ears are clogged, and my nose turns cold, and my tongue's back rolled, and my cheeks slacken, and my lips blacken, and my mouth blubbers, and my spittle slobbers, and my hair stands up, and my heartbeat droop, and my hands quiver, and my feet stiffen. I try to stare rebellion at my mirror. Then I try bravado. You will die, I say to my image. I am not very convincing, and I remember the smells of the dead. The girl who wanted to have an affair with an older man had a body that smelled of ripe apricots. In a warm bed with the lights low, she pursued her fantasy. I mine. What wondrous life is this I lead? Ripe apples drop about my head. The luscious clusters of the vine upon my mouth do crush their wine. The nectarine and curious peach into my hands themselves do reach. Stumbling on melons as I pass, ensnared with flowers, I fall on grass. Of the five senses, smell should be the one that is persuasive about death. The image in the mirror chills without quite frightening me, so I sniff the air in the bathroom, trying to discover the scent of my own corruption. Nothing but soaps, oils, astringent lotions, burn remedies, alcohol, dusting powder. I put the palm of my hand against my mouth and breathe against it, hoping to get a whiff of my own breath. As the Count leaned over me and his hands touched me, I could not repress a shudder. It may have been that his breath was rank, but a horrible feeling of nausea came over me, which, do what I would, I could not conceal. The Count, evidently noticing it, drew back. What little odor I trap with my palm is nothing so extreme. There is no taint, only the remnant smells of a rather pleasing meal. My armpits, they hardly smell of death. That's the companionable odor of life. Work in the hot sun, motion, emotion, a steep trail at Yosemite, a full pack on my shoulders, or the rush of excitement in a canoe on a lake in Minnesota as, at 32, I catch the very first fish of my life. And another first, sweat trickling down my sides, scared because the erection I had carried about with me for months was in danger, as it was suddenly clear that the girl in my arms smelled of face powder, and the perfume named Taboo was about to yield to what had been summer and autumn, a hopeless siege. I had grown used to all her nose. I knew her reasons and the tightness with which she kept her knees together. I expected and almost savored the nightly struggle in which I was given more than I deserved, less than I needed. And love, whose characteristics were hot breath, cupped breasts, the wriggling of a slim body, and a door closing nightly at check-in time at Neal Hall at Ohio State University. Fuck that place. That night, the smell of my sweat mingled with her taboo and other joyful odors about which I had not allowed myself to dream. A light snow falling covered the riverbank behind the stadium as the quality of her struggles changed, and I was in the throes of recognition. Coats, erection, buttons, breasts, zippers, kisses, hooks, and too many elbows and knees, sweat and snow, my tears and hers, and the exultant interior shout of a boy and a girl falling from innocence to experience at last. It cheers me to remember our smell on that cold night. It had nothing of the primal taint upon it. Yet I was dying, and have been ever since. In the presence of my mirror, in the cycle of the seasons that I teach myself to believe are healing, I discern my death. Patience, I say, corruption is what happens to the corpse, not the self. I am my acts, not my wrinkles. The secret truth is I do not want to die. Let Abraham's bosom wait, and the canoe on which I'll drift to that isle melodious where spirits get them home. Hades, Valhalla, heaven. I'd much prefer for them to wait because I think of kisses and the perfumed nights to come, and children humming nonsense in the dusk, books unread and music still unheard. No wonder that the suspicion comes to me that the greedy count, with his tainted breath, who drinks the blood of the living to sustain his life, has made an enviable choice. When I see the waxen forms and experience the losses mortality imposes on us, I find it easy to see him as an allegorical figure of life, refusing to let go. Then I remember what makes him survive, the living blood of the living. He has not evaded death, only corruption, and that is what happens to the husk, not to the self. The self is what I do. I am my acts. Dracula is his. Dracula was deceived. He dreamed of immortality and, by an act of overwhelming energy, managed to animate a corpse. We both achieve embraces. The story goes that the Yiddish speaking town of Kelm was populated in a unique way. The angel of the Lord, whose task it was to distribute wise and foolish mankind about the world, stumbled on his rounds, spilling what was left in his sack of foolish souls over the place that was to become Kelm. The citizens of Kelm since that time have been a byword for stupidity. Now there was a resident of Kelm who heard that the crow was one of nature's long lived birds. Its lifespan was 200 years. The good Kelmite, who prided himself on his skepticism, determined to test the popular opinion, bought himself a crow and sat down beside its cage to wait for it to die. Dr. Thomas Gower, whose medical specialty is death, has deep pouches under his eyes. He is wearing a blue blazer with the insignia of a school I do not recognize. His shirt and tie make a startling color combination, which, as I notice after a moment, is extraordinarily subtle and pleasing. The tie is soft green with delicate red lines running ambiguously through it. His shirt is a muted yellow striped with dusky blue. Though he speaks without strain, his voice has a light rasp to it. I particularly like the way his eyes grow wide or shaded in response to what he is saying. I think he means to be open, but his comfortable slouch has something studied in it, as if it were something he had learned to do for the sake of his dying patients. I suppose they want to see him as easy, relaxed. It must reassure them to look into his genial dark brown eyes, or to catch glimpses, as I do, of his crossed feet under the mahogany table. To his patients, all of whom are dying of terminal cancer, his fine wool socks and expensive glove leather loafers have the warm look of continuity. 10 minutes ago, I heard one of his colleagues telling him goodbye. That was Dr. Claxon Howell of the University of California Medical School, who, clean out, cleaning out his own office, turned over a case full of expensive medicines to be given free to Gower's poorer patients. They're all yours, said Dr. Howell. I'm getting out of the cancer business. Remembering the relief on Dr. Howell's face, I asked Dr. Gower, why are you still in it? That, says Dr. Gower, is what I've been asking my psychiatrist 3 times a week for the past 8 years. Dr. Gower is not being evasive. He really does not know why he spends all of his professional life in the presence of people whose lives he cannot possibly save. Of course, I've thought about it, he says, and from time to time I give myself an answer that makes sense. For a while, but the answers keep changing. The way doctors do, he rests his head on his chin, 3 fingers playing along his cheek. He is as middle aged as I am, but I have the feeling he knows something I may never know. Early in my career, the formulation was heroic. Which medicine will most stretch my mind? And cancer is still the most intellectually demanding medical problem. There are 4 original Goya prints on the office wall behind him. As if sensing the connection I am making between those grimy, humorous pieces and why he practices terminal medicine, he says, of course, there is some other pull as well. Obviously, I get something out of these relationships with the dying. What? What you get? Perhaps making a book like this one. His smile is mischievous, but he knows that the barb hurts. What do you think that might be? Who knows? A closeness to primal things? I'm not sure. At its best, I give my patients something, or I get something from them that they are glad to give. You'll notice that I'm not ruling out any murky motivations. I just don't happen to know what they are. Don't know or don't want to know. Have it any way you like. It's true that I enjoy being with my patients, but you'll have to think hard about that word, enjoy. You're a teacher, I suppose. You think of yourself as leading the young, making a difference to their minds. In a sense, I am a teacher too. I know a lot about cancer, a great deal about death. I lead my patients to know about cancer and death. Only it is their cancer and their death. There is a pause. Yes, I enjoy my work. I spend a long afternoon talking with his patients, looking into the eyes of dying men and women. Dr. Gower has explained to each of them that I am a writer, that I am doing a chapter on death for a book, and that I want to understand what is happening to them. I am amazed at their unembarrassed willingness to talk. It is a hard afternoon for me, not made any easier by Dr. Gower's last remark. If you can bear it, remember that they are no different than you or me. We're all dying. The only difference is that they've been given notice. Each of Dr. Gower's patients wears a white examining room garment and lies extended on a Nagahide, Nagahide covered table. Except for telling his patients what I am up to, he has made no difference in his routine. As I look into one face or another and see nothing special, I get the helpless feeling that death is invisible. Orazio Gardini, a 53-year-old San Jose teamster, lies back on the table grinning at me because, having just asked him how he felt the day he was told he had an operable but not curable cancer, I have suddenly gone pale. Well, he laughs. It was no joke. My wife got really scared. His wife, who is sitting beside him, is not laughing. She fits my preconception of what the dying ought to look like, but there is nothing wrong with her except that she is waiting for her husband to die. Orazio says, well, it's no joke, but what are you going to do? You can't go around howling, so I don't do much. Sure, I quit my work. I have a little pension, and I'm taking time out to grow some flowers or to go camping. We like to go camping, and there's places in this state we haven't even seen yet. But mostly we take it easy. We've got friends. I see them a lot, and our children. They've grown, and it's nice to go over to Oakland. You take it easy, that's about it. But it's almost impossible for me to articulate this. But you're waiting to? He doesn't let me finish. I'm not waiting, he says. His wife looks very scared. For her sake, I am sure. He forms again his wide, deliberately simplistic grin. We're just taking it easy. Like I say, one thing at a time. Then there is Anya Verona's 48, both of whose breasts have been removed, who will not use any euphemisms at all. She is blonde and competent, a skilled insurance adjuster, literate, beautiful, and so flirtatious that I have an access of anxiety for my virtue in the tiny examining room where I sit at her shapely knee, trying to keep my eyes on my clipboard. Dying, she says, is only an accentuation of what you're really like, and I wasn't so bad to begin with. Don't get the wrong idea. I'd much rather not be dying. I like being alive. Especially I like being loved, and that helps. I've been well loved. I'm still well loved, and I don't mean just fucking. Though I like that too, a lot. But we're all of us born to die. If you're looking for melodramatic quotes from me, you're not going to get any. You can say, if you want to, that I'd rather not die. But you see, my life hasn't changed. The man I have loved for the last 4 years, loves me. That was between us. Before the cancer, and we've got it now. What I don't like, all right, here's your melodramatic quotation, is mutilation. A woman doesn't like losing a breast, and I've lost them both. I resent that, but I don't resent dying. My lover liked my breasts, and he loves me. It would be nicer if I were still all there. But we are, and that's a lot. Belle Washington is in great pain. Thank you, you son of a bitch. You shut me off. Belle Washington is in great pain. She has been hurting for the last 3 months and is on a steady regime of morphine which dulls but does not mask her pain. She is a black woman in her early 40s, but is already a grandmother several times over. When she talks to me, she pants as she tries to manage her replies between surges of agony. How are you? I ask, though I know very well how she is. She has less than a week left to her. The carcinoma in her body has broken loose. Invasion is complete. Not too bad, she says. Dr. Gowan's giving me some pills. They help some. She smiles in a way that I find unbearable because she is trying to make my situation easier. She is a black woman with an eighth grade education who has plenty of reason to feel unkindly towards a strange white man with a clipboard intruding on her final days. She is lying on her side, her neck and chest laced with scars where tumors the size of exploded popcorn were harvested from her flesh. But leaning on her elbow, she reassures me by offering me a complex courtesy. Because she is so strong, I risk asking her how she manages to keep her spirits up. Well, she says, a little proud. Never, never hurt nobody. You keep a good proud, then things can't hurt you. She was born in Palestine, Texas, and is the fourth of 12 children. For the last 20 years of her life, she has lived in San Francisco, where she worked, wrapping gifts at Magnan's, a clothing store for women. 2 years ago, after a biopsy, she learned she had cancer. When I woke up and found out, went crazy. I went crazy. I jumped out of bed and started running up the hall. I just had this little knot in my breast, nothing big, and I went to see my doctor and he said I had to have the breast removed. Well, it took about a year to get used to that, and then I come around to thinking I had plenty to live for, two grandchildren, my friends, my church. I am a Methodist, and when I can, I just live in the church. And lying in the hospital, it does you good to think about God. Though, to tell the truth, I don't know much about religion. Still, I like to think about God. I feel closer to Him. Before, I didn't have time to read the Bible and concentrate. One good thing about dying, you have more time to read. And lately, there have been some bad days, but whether it's good or whether it's bad, I'm coming to see that God is being good to me. Before, when all this was when all this with the doctors began, I used to put up a fight, but not anymore. I see how it is, coming in, going out, coming in. There's no need to put up a fight anymore, though I wish I didn't feel the pain. Leaving Dr. Gower's shiny building, I wonder for the thousandth time whether a writer is not a quintessential voyeur. In the last few years, I have spent so many hours looking into the eyes of men and women in agony. Murderers, bomb throwers, spies, drug takers, sexual perverts, and now the mortally sick. Tell me, I say to them, and as if it were a natural thing to do, they tell me. I have heard a great many lives as the sufferers at my urging remember. When I get home, I hide in my study. I sit in the strange canvas chair I have that folds me up, not quite, but nearly, like an unborn child, and wait, hoping that the mortality against which I have pressed so hard today will recede a little. If only I sit still. But my room is filled with books, with voices, one of which insists, remember now thy Creator in the days of thy youth, while the evil days come not, nor the years draw nigh, when thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them. While the sun, or the light, or the moon, or the stars be not darkened, nor the clouds return after the rain. In the day when the keepers of the house shall tremble, and the strong men shall bow themselves, and the grinders cease because they are few, and those that look out of the windows be darkened, and the doors shall be shut in the streets when the sound of the grinding is low, and he shall rise up at the voice of the bird, and all the daughters of music shall be brought low. You're not one. This is a continuation. Also, when they shall be afraid of that which is high, and fears shall be in the way, and the almond tree shall flourish, and the grasshopper shall be a burden, and desire shall fail, because men goeth to his long home, and the mourners go about the streets. Or even after the silver cord be loosed, or the golden bowl be broken, or the pitcher be broken at the fountain, or the wheel broken at the cistern. Then shall the dust return to the earth as it was, and the spirit shall return unto God who gave it. And that is the end of chapter 3. Who is this? Minu Brittle. Okay, good night. Love you. I lied. I love you. Good morning. Well, you came at the wrong time. You should have came 58 minutes ago when I started. That's all, Brobs. That's all, Brobs.